Welcome to Evolving Door, the podcast where I interview guests about the moments in their lives that have really moved them forwards, where they had a significant shift in their thinking, their awareness, and their understanding about life in all its various aspects. Join me and expect to be enlivened, enriched, and inspired on your personal journey of evolution. Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of Jahnavi Harrison's interview. If you're coming to this one and you've clicked on it and you haven't heard part 1, make sure you listen to part 1 too. Make sure you also listen to the trailer. It'll give you a real context for this part 2 of the interview. We talk about what led to her, in her own words, being a real goody two-shoes, purposefully actually missing a flight. Also, she shares about sometimes it takes a really long time to look at yourself and to look back at a big decision and go, actually, I think it was the right decision. She also shares the power of friends believing in you and helping you to really make a go of your dreams. And ultimately, where she finally comes to a point where she can actually own the identity of being an artist and a musician. It's a great second part of the interview. Please join me now and let's dive straight back in.
So I think at a certain point I thought, I don't know if I should do this anymore. I think maybe now I sort of had my fun time, and maybe I should go back to doing a real job. And so
conform.
Yeah, I went home to England, and I'd been writing freelance since I graduated, actually, even throughout this time, and I'd sort of been writing for a few arts magazines, and I would do interviews with different artists or musicians, and also sort of reviewing concerts and things like that. So I'd sort of kept that going in the background. And one of the magazines that I was writing for, they made an offer to me to become the editor. I think they wanted to sort of groom a young person to kind of take this up, and so it was quite a big offer at the time for me, and I thought, wow, an editor, yeah, that's that sounds really good.
Yeah.
It's a real job.
Professional, yeah.
I can tell people I'm an editor, I'm not just this sort of fly-by-night musician, which actually, to be honest, I think that was part of the problem. I wasn't thinking of myself as a musician, because every time someone would say, what do you do? I couldn't say musician, because I thought, well, I didn't study music at university. I'm not a musician. I'm not qualified. And so I felt that I almost didn't have a thing that I could say when someone said, what do you do? And so, yeah, I was very grateful for this offer of the job, and I accepted. And before I was due to take it on, I went to do the last few events in the States. And I think I just had this deep realization whilst I was doing that this is really, I could say it was a calling now, because perhaps you can see what happened next. But at the time, I didn't know if it was a calling. I didn't really know what it was. I just felt I just had to continue. And I did.
Or maybe you didn't want to give it up. Even if you didn't know where it would lead, you just didn't want to finally.
I didn't want to give it up. That was the thing. I didn't want to give it up. And I actually did probably, I've always been a little bit of a goody two-shoes in my childhood, because I like to do things properly. And I did what I thought was the most daring thing that I'd ever done, which was intentionally miss a flight, because I was due to catch the flight back to London, and I was going back to start this job, and they were expecting me. And the day of my flight, I just felt this inner turmoil, and I was thinking, I can't give up this aspect of my life. It's been so meaningful to me, and what am I actually trying to do here? And it was like down to the last 20 minutes before I had to leave, and I just decided, I'm not going to go. I'm just going to stay here. And that was.
Tell me, were you in an apartment? Like, describe the scene for us.
I went. So I think I'd been staying for a little time at a temple in New York. They had an ashram there, and I was sort of in the interim. I was passing through, and so I was seeing some friends beforehand, and I went back to the temple to collect my bags that I'd already packed. And I got back to the temple, and it's a big building, 6-story building, and so there's this big staircase. And I got my bag out into the hallway, and I was sitting on the staircase, and I was just thinking, I just had this feeling, and it was like I didn't even recognize myself. I'm like, what are you talking about? You have to get on the flight, you know? You don't do stuff like that, miss flights. It's not allowed, you know? And I talked to a few people, but I think it was a rare time in my life where I didn't really have the opportunity to consult many people to kind of validate what I was feeling, because it was sort of like that. It was down to the wire. Like I had to leave for the airport, and I just made the decision, and it was very exhilarating, but it was certainly a bomb to drop on, you know, on my family, on my friends back in England, on my future employers, to say I'm not coming back. And at the time there was really this sense of fear. I think so many people will identify with this when you make a dramatic turn and do something that people don't expect, and then you almost have to justify, and then you have to sort of prove that the decision you made was the right one, in order for people to accept it, because otherwise everyone's just looking at you saying, yeah, that was a really dumb thing to do, you know.
So did you feel, it's a very interesting point. I mean, first of all, I knowing you a little, or anyone as you describe yourself, who, and even you've mentioned it so many times about like, it's not legit unless the society, the people who draw the lines say that it's okay, you know, because it you know, whether it's acknowledged through university or whatever. So that's a really big step to actually not go. So and also to make that decision yourself, you must have felt super empowered on one side, but also, as you say, now I understand, I think, when you said I doubt myself every day since, because it's kind of like at every moment, it's like everything ahead of you, all the possibilities are open, but at the same time, not knowing for sure what's going to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, it felt exhilarating in the moment. It certainly did. And I felt this giddiness, you know. Maybe that's like when people, you know, go out and do something their parents are not going to approve of, that kind of feeling. But I didn't do that stuff when I was a teenager. I was a pretty good girl. So it was like, oh my God, I know I'm going to be in trouble. And it was exciting. But the next morning I woke up and I was like, wow, so what is this decision that I've made? And I realized that I actually had no idea how this was supposed to look.
The day to day.
The day to day, yeah. I just had this sense that something that I've been pursuing, it's not the time to give up on it. And so I didn't. And for the next couple of years, I continued doing things, but there was long periods of pretty deep self-doubt. Frankly, it was really, I was really vacillating between thinking that was a really silly thing to do, and I should go home and get a real job, if I even can still get a real job now that everyone thinks I'm just so irresponsible and all of that. And feeling inspired and empowered by the experiences that were manifesting for me and the opportunities that were unfolding. And I think it's the case for anyone who takes a turn that you do spend, it depends how long it takes for people to look at you and say, or for you to look at yourself and say, okay, that was the right decision. And sometimes it takes a really long time. And definitely, you know, when I would go home and spend periods back in England, people would often say things to the effect of, you know, you should really figure out your life. You should really figure out what you're really going to do. And, you know, or like some people that I knew, different sort of people that considered themselves like aunties and uncles in my life, that, you know, oh, well, I wouldn't let my daughter do that. And, you know, and so I'd feel kind of definitely judged and disapproval. And that was a lot for me to stomach, for someone that always wanted to do the right thing.
And to be appreciated for doing the right thing, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all want appreciation, but I think it's part of the artistic nature is to want to be seen and understood, and understood for the intentions that you're bringing to something. and to be seen in the light that, you know, is favorable, and all of those things were not quite in alignment, and it felt uncomfortable for quite a long time.
Yeah. Well, fast forward for quite some years now, you've been doing these, I think it's pause for thought, sharing ideas about, I guess, meaning in life in relation to the issues in society on radio, BBC Radio 4, which is proper legit. Yeah, it's an institution, which is very respected. And also, you know, recently was at the Shaw Theatre. You headlined your own show in London, sellout show. I unfortunately I wasn't able to go, but I saw some clips of it online and stuff. And I have to say, genuinely, it was glorious. You know, it was celebratory. It was beautiful. It was, and it had a real, like I say, celebratory aspect to it. And I wanted to ask you, because you are you have been, or you've shared about being a reluctant front person, or dare I say it, sort of star. And I think, you know, when I've gone to kirtans, you know, whether they're in people's houses or sometimes at the temple, sometimes they can be a bit stoic and a bit miserable. Like they're so serious. You know, they're so kind of, people are like, you come in and people don't acknowledge you or say hello or anything. So you really have captured in that show something which felt very wholesome and you know, authentic, but really was like joyous. And I just wondered if you could share some thoughts on, because I've heard you speak before about you came to embrace that role or that position that was very uncomfortable for a long time. Could you just tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, that in itself has been a journey for me, and it was only over the years that I started to sing, and people would ask me to sing or to lead the kirtan. And again, you know, I felt like I'm not a real kirtan leader because no one's taught me how to do it, and I never had singing lessons and all these things, you know, these ideas you have in your head. But I found that I always knew I loved to sing. I just wasn't used to singing really in front of people. And I gradually became comfortable with it, and then found that it was something that I loved to do. And it started to take over as the main thing that I would do over time. Generally, I was always more comfortable being in a supportive role, and I'd sort of groomed myself with playing violin in that way. You know, it's just sort of playing accompaniment and support, and this thing about listening, really being fine-tuned to listen, how to best support musically what the leader was doing. So I was in a place, yet again, a sort of turning point about a year and a half ago, where I felt like, well, it's sort of coming to the end of a decade that I've been doing this, and maybe now it's time to get a real job. Because I'd released an album about 5 years ago, and it became really popular, much to my surprise, again, because it wasn't something that I really was envisioning to work out like that. And so some friends were saying, you know, you should really give it a big push and put your music out there farther in the world. And I was like, no, that's not me. And I was saying that for so many years. And then they just said, look, we'll help you, and this is a vision. Why don't you just try it? So I said, well, I'll try it for 3 months, and let's just, if I don't like it, I'll stop.
See what happens.
Yeah, see what happens. Because I thought, look, you know, I'd come into another decade of my life, the 30s, and I'm finding with the 30s that one of the things to reconcile with, which anyone that's gone through their 30s will know, is that you suddenly have to acknowledge that actually the years are passing by, and you know, your youth as you sort of experienced it it's not that you're not still youthful, but you know, you start to change.
There's a clock. There's a sort of a clock, yeah.
You start to hear the clock. So it's like, I was thinking, actually, yeah, why not? You know, if I don't ever do this, maybe I'll be 40 or 50 and saying, I should have just tried it, you know, and you never know, it could have been good. So I agreed to try it. And so the London show that you're referring to, that was the first one. No, sorry, we did Moscow first, we did London, we did a smaller event in LA with the same team, and we did New York. Wow. And all in a sort of 3-month period. And that was an experience that I expected to 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 really dislike and find that it would feel very uncomfortable and strange for me. And I found, I wouldn't say the opposite, because there's definitely discomfort in putting on a show. And again, it's this navigation between sort of purity of a practice and the performance space. But I found that in doing it, that I'd grown up, that I felt more at ease within myself to hold that tension and to be comfortable with the idea that when you come in front of people, not everyone's going to appreciate you, not everyone's going to understand you, not everyone's going to receive something in the way that you want them to. But that's part of the surrender of, sharing anything. And I felt more comfortable with that than I ever have. And I said, I think part of the celebratory aspect of it was a celebration to actually feel joyous about sharing something that means a lot to me. And that is the synthesis of the traditional aspect of this, of this practice of kirtan, sort of this call and response chanting, but also bringing in my love for music, of different genres of music, and of sort of crafting a narrative experience through the show, because that was an important part, that the sequencing of the pieces and the meaning and explanation of them would guide people on a bit of a journey. And that for me was, as you say, I've been doing the radio things, I've been writing for many years, and so to bring together all these elements was extremely rewarding and very humbling. Actually, I felt so humbled by the experience.
Did you feel like it was a sort of a combination of all those things, a sort of an arrival, if you will, not so much just externally, but kind of almost within yourself, and then the show is just an expression of that? Would that be fair to say? Or
it did.
It certainly felt to me from the outside that you had grown into it, and it was almost like the fruit of all of those years of, all the different aspects that we've discussed, kind of really fructifying there in a moment, if you like. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it felt, so the word arrival in a way implies that it was a goal that I wanted to arrive at. And I would say I didn't want it, and I wasn't seeking it. So it was sort of a strange, it did feel like a kind of arrival, but not in a way that I expected, because I thought, well, this wasn't my dream to sort of have this concert presentation. But then as I look back at all the things that I loved to do, the things that I had pursued, the things that filled me with joy, I realized, well, actually this is a culmination, or a culmination so far of all these things. And it actually was an experience for me of finally owning the identity of being an artist and a musician. It's something that I haven't been able to accept for a long time or ever. And that seems weird, but it's, even though those are the things that I was doing, but in accepting it, I found a freedom to actually express and say, oh, this is how I want to curate this. This is what I think will be beautiful. And this is what I want to share. And that was a very freeing and joyful experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I guess that's what I kind of meant, rather than it being an arrival as an external validation, but an arrival within yourself.
Yeah.
For you, just purely for you.
Yeah. But again, it was just unexpected. I didn't expect to feel that way. And even until the last show that we did, because the first one I was extremely nervous, and then the others, they all went really well, but I was just sort of doubtful till the end. And then I remember the last one in New York. I had been living in New York at that point for a couple of years, and it happened sort of at the culmination of a long chunk of time there. And so it just so happened that the concert venue was very close to where I'd been living, in the same neighborhood. So there was this sense of both having matured and um, just doing something that I never thought that I would do. I mean, I really, and you know, people that have known me since childhood, they also marvel because they always say, you know, you were so shy. Like, what happened? You were just blush just at anyone just saying your name, and you know that I was very shy, and so for me to look back on myself and all these years of criticism and doubt, self-criticism, and just to feel that it can be, I like that word you use of celebratory, that it can be so celebratory to just offer something from the heart with a bit of a sense of detachment. I think that's an important lesson for an artist, is that detachment. And I think the detachment was because I had this feeling that, well, this wasn't something that I was it wasn't something I expected for myself. So there was a sense of detachment that I could just experience it, and you know.
Yeah. Well, something very interesting you mentioned, because I think so. It sort of touches on this point of the idea of mentors or people supporting you, because you said some friends or some people around you said, "We want to help you. Let's try this." If
Yeah.
they hadn't have done that, so I think sometimes, as a creative artistic person, if you're the only one pushing it, and it's you pushing it all the time, then
Yeah.
all of those doubts really can come in a lot. Whereas when somebody external, you know, a well-wisher or a supporter or a mentor or whatever, it's kind of like, oh, really? So you think we could try it? And it's somebody other than you. So how important was that? Do you think you ever would have done it without those people coming and saying, let's try it?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
That was
So
a
that's a blessing, isn't it?
that was a huge, it was a blessing. I didn't know if it was a blessing at the time. I was like, well, I don't know about this, but they were people that I respected and trusted as friends, and they happened to be professionally, you know, having backgrounds in various aspects of management, consultation, finance. And so I thought, well, you know, that's not my world, that's not my background. So let me trust that we could at least experiment and
Yeah.
see how this works, to have a, you know, a synergy, a collaboration. And that in itself has been extremely humbling, because you really see that the artist is only one part of this aspect of offering something to the world. That all those other parts are equally required and equally important, and therefore it's a sort of humility that you can understand that, you know, even in a team of people, often it really helps to have a leader, to have a figurehead, and people will gather around that person. Or in a band, somebody leads the band. But if you took away any of the other components, including the manager, including the people that do the sound setup, the thing just wouldn't happen. So it's a humbling thing to see that it takes all of those diverse roles and elements in order to manifest something.
And it's really interesting too, because I think, as you mentioned earlier, with social media and everything, often we're trying to manage all of our feelings, often by ourselves, you know, so we can have influences or inputs that we bring in to help us, but a lot of times, and it can be very exposing. And so that's why traditionally the artist or the musician always has the agent or the manager, because
Yeah.
the people can be having a big argument and saying anything they like about the artist, but the manager or the agent shields the agent from, or the musician from that, or the artist, and they say, how did it go? And they'll just tell you the bits that you need to hear, or they can fight a much harder bargain on your behalf, whereas you would never do that on your own behalf.
Right.
So it's a very interesting dynamic. That said,
Fascinating.
Fascinating. But that said, when we have to then deal with our own lives, our own personal experience, that's a challenging thing, because wouldn't it be great if we had all of those different aspects within ourselves, but we don't. So we can often feel quite exposed, because, especially as you say, through social media, immediately those people, whoever they are, there is no shield. They're coming straight to us.
Yeah.
So, but tell us about how it felt on the inside. Like, even, you're up there on the stage and everything, and it's brilliant and everything else, but share with us a little bit about how, even in such success, perhaps do you suddenly feel completely confident, or are there two sides to it?
I think um, there's a confidence that one feels as you do something that you're aware that you have a competence for. Like I especially, by this point, okay, I know I can play the violin, I know I can sing, I know we've rehearsed this, I know that we can present these pieces, and I know that I can have some dialogue with the audience and explain things. So there's a certain sense of confidence there. But as to the confidence of, is this valuable to the world? Is this an ego trip? Is this something that people are going to receive and find some meaning in their heart? There's always doubt around that, because I don't, I don't feel a sense of assurance about that. I believe that what I'm sharing, because it's not sort of just my ideas, it's something that's from an authentic spiritual tradition, and it's very precious, and it's impacted my life. So I believe that it's valuable, but I don't know if I'm the person to be the one to share it. Am I going to be a good vessel for this? There's always a doubt there. So I'd say what it felt like on the inside was, plugging into that conscious conscience of what the skills that I've gained over the years. And then really for me, it's a state of prayer. I try to have that prayer internally, and I may articulate that prayer in different ways, but a way that I've been liking to think of it lately is this first line of famous prayer of Saint Francis: "Make me a channel of your peace." That I want to use my life in a meaningful way that serves others, and these are the skills I've got. This is how I can serve, and I want someone else's life to be meaningfully touched by this experience. But I don't think that that's within my power. It's not within my power to give somebody a spiritual experience. I can facilitate, I can create the nice environment for it, I can sing, but really that, as far as I understand and experience it, that's a divine power, and so it's really trying to maintain a state of sincerity and prayer, and then you just hold on.
Try and let go of the result, isn't it? It's hard though. Sometimes we have like 300 people saying all lovely things, and one person says something not so nice, and I guess to the degree that we're still, we still feel it sometimes, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a constant navigation of the ego, and it's a humbling thing, because all you can do is be honest about where you're at. So if somebody says something that's not particularly complimentary, I can just honestly say, wow, that pinches me a bit, or that actually makes me feel sad, or whatever it is. But then I have to, go through the cycle of then remembering that, all right, well, I just have to keep going. If it is service, it's said that the greatest definition of service, or the greatest manifestation of service, is that it's uninterrupted, that it's not interrupted by circumstance. You don't say, oh, I don't feel like changing the baby's nappy today, so I'm just not going to do it. It's service. It's motivated by love, and so even if you feel you're having a bad day, you still do it. So,
there's a great freedom in that, isn't it? If we can lean into that.
Yeah.
I'd just like to ask you, you had a mentor. I got to meet her once, Yamuna, who was a great student of Bhakti Yoga in our tradition. And, you mentioned at a certain point in your maybe early 20s, you were starting to embrace a personal practice. So I guess as someone who grew up around these things, was there a period where you kind of, let's say, fell away from it a bit, or kind of maybe rebelled against it a little bit and then re-embraced it? I'm particularly interested in what led to you re-embracing it, and how how you did that, because I think once you kind of, not that you've lost faith, but if you move away from faith, sometimes the second time around, if you're lucky enough to get it's because it's more real. It's not just because you're sort of supposed to do it or because other people are doing it or whatever. And I feel from you, the way you share and the way you embody what you're doing, is that it feels like it's real for you. And I dare to say that is a little bit uncommon. I think sometimes it's easy to do things, as the Americans say, by route. But so tell me a little bit about maybe what it was that, brought you back to your practice and what made it kind of real and personal.
Well, I would say that, I've already characterized myself as a goody two shoes as a child. And I don't think it was just being a goody two shoes. I think there were certain things that I just felt were already decided within me. For instance, I didn't feel attracted to experiment with like drugs and alcohol as a teenager, whereas some of my many of my friends did. And it wasn't that I was feeling I was suppressing a desire to do that. I genuinely just didn't feel I wanted to. So there was a certain amount of rebellion that was just, outward rebellion that was just off the table because I wasn't interested. That said, I definitely had an internal questioning of faith. And my parents are very broad-minded, and they always encouraged us to really question and doubt. And my father particularly was very actively interested in studying other religious traditions. And so I always felt that we could have conversations about it, and really, I knew that we would even talk about it. I knew that if I also wanted to just pursue some other path or explore it, that there wouldn't be a heavy judgment or anything. But it just so happened that I think it's not as important to locate it in the timeline of what I've talked about previously, but I'll say it was sort of pre-university time. It was about 17. And I met Yamuna Devi, as she's called. I met her as a child, but this was sort of like a chance meeting. My mom and I were in Canada, where she now lived. I met her as a child in England, and I just got a chance to interact with her and her companion Dina Tarine for about 24 hours, really. We went to stay with them overnight, and they lived in a valley up in the Rocky Mountains, and they had built this beautiful straw bale house with a traditional like cob clay floor, and it was just a really exquisite place where they lived in this very very dedicated, very deeply focused spiritual way, and it was in a very remote but idyllic kind of setting. And I was at a point where I wouldn't say I was having strong doubts sort of on a very refined philosophical level or something. I think I was just wondering, how am I going to practice this in my life? Am I going to, or just wondering, and when I met them, and specifically, I think, I don't want to say that they both didn't impact me very deeply, but I think particularly because I saw something of I don't know which is the right way to say it. I saw myself in her, or something.
I know what you mean. Yeah, you could
connect. Yeah, she's an artist, and she was an artist of many mediums, and so that was inspiring to me. It was like, when you as a child, you look up to someone, you idolize them, and you think, I want to be just like that. So I looked at her, and in the time we spent with her, which was so brief, I just felt this profound experience of love on a very deep level, of acceptance, of purity of her own practice, of a depth of wisdom and realization. And um, it was like, when you meet someone and you're like, wow, they've got the real thing. Like that's the thing, whatever it is. You just feel that is there's something profound here. And when we were driving away, I can't remember if I said it to my mom or if I just thought it, but I was like, I want to experience that. I want to know what that is, or what is it that she has, how has she come to be that kind of person? I want to understand how I could be like that. Not that I ever thought I could be like that, and not that I think I ever will be, but it was like, even if I could just be a little bit of what she is.
Yeah.
And so I made the point over the next 7 years. They were so extremely kind and generous to agree to keep correspondence with me, and I went and stayed with them a few times as well. And those times were extremely precious and shaping for me, because this was at the start of my journey of doing these types of music and all these other kinds of tours and events. And when I would stay with them, we would talk about it and reflect on it on a deeper level, and they would kind of challenge me and poke and question. And so I found that in later years, and she passed away about 7-8 years ago, and I found that, in every situation, when I have a doubt or when I have a concern, does this have authenticity? Does this feel right? I'll try to hear her voice, hear the instructions and principles that she shared with me, and I find that it's stabilizing, it's grounding, and it can answer some questions that I would have.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like a significant. So she's a significant inner role in your life, I suppose.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I also have my spiritual master, my guru. I'm going for two, plays an equally important part in my life, and the other gurus in my life, my parents and so many other mentors and guides. But I would say that for a time, specifically with her, when I would lead kirtan, because I did have the experience of leading the kirtan in her presence. So I knew that she was a very, very sensitive and perceptive person. And I had the experience of feeling that when I would sing, that she would hear my heart almost, you'd be able to hear, where are you at? So I would then, when I no longer had the opportunity for that, I would imagine her to be sitting at the back of wherever I was doing something, and see that she's listening, and not just as an imagination. I believe that. I believe that people don't die, that they pass on to another realm, which is beyond our perception, but that they're still very much present. And so I would feel that, okay, she's listening to me, she's seeing me. So let me try to do this as purely as I can, and whatever is the shortfall, which there will be much, I pray for guidance to make up the rest, and to just refine it further.
That's a powerful point. I wanted to ask you about that. It's easy to put a high standard on ourselves, but what would you like to say about how important it is to start nonetheless? Like, even if we're not perfect, or we're not pure, or we're not, we feel conflicted in our intentions, etc., etc. Sometimes that stops us from beginning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many mental blocks which stop us from doing something, and I guess it's just like anything. Like, if on that first day that I opened my violin case and I drew the bow over the strings, if I immediately said, well, this sounds terrible, I can't play, I'm never going to do this, it would just be ridiculous. You'd say, but how do you expect to play a piece of music when you don't yet know how to make a sound with one note that sounds smooth?
Yeah.
You have to start somewhere. Or, like, if you come into a house, that's one of the fulfilling things I find as an artist who is often too much caught in my head. I do find, like, housework quite just calming, because it's
therapeutic.
Therapeutic. You're using your hands, your mind can just switch off, or you can think about ideas. And so you see this pile of dirty dishes, and it's like, it looks immense, or kitchen that's just like looks like it just got bombed, and you have to start somewhere. There's just no shortcut. So I think when you look at something as a continuum, as a process, it's so relieving, because there's so much of temptation in this world of social media to be an overnight success, to have it all right now. And I just don't think that that's for anyone that's really cultivated something that has substance and depth. That's just not really real. It doesn't happen like that. And it's a very humbling thing to start somewhere and to acknowledge that, okay, I'm just a student. I'm just a student, and I could be a student for the rest of my life. I am a student for the rest of my life, and I don't know if I hope I don't ever feel that I've got it, or now this is it. I'm pure, or now I really know how to do it, because that space of humility, of being a student, being a receiver of grace, it keeps your heart open, and in that state, I believe you can learn from every experience.
Yeah, definitely. This last point that I wanted to ask you about. So I see you as very wholesome and very whole in and of yourself, right? I think you feel very complete. But have you felt, which I think a lot of girls do over the years, that you ought to, or have you felt it within yourself? I'm sure you've heard it from outside that, are you going to have a partner, and all of that stuff. So just tell me a little bit about that kind of thing, in your life.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I definitely don't think. I think it's something to be a little wary of if you just assume. At least this has been my reflection in life, that there's times in life where I could feel very empowered and like, yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine on my own, and this is very fulfilling. And I would say that creativity and art have been extremely fulfilling for me. And so there's times when I felt like partnership is not a huge priority. It's not that I'm not interested, but it's just something else seems to bring greater fulfillment potentially. But I think this is like we could talk an hour about this. It's a big topic. I've had my own journey sort of grappling with that, and it's hard to know what thing to talk about. It's without being more specific. But
do you think that? I think a lot of girls are brought up, and I suppose men as well, to kind of feel like you do your gap year, or you do your this and that, you do your bit of traveling around with the music band or whatever it is you do, but you haven't kind of really back to your thing about proper kind of settle down until you've kind of connected. And I suppose there's that sense of that you're not complete, which we know is not true.
Yeah.
But there's still a powerful force internally and externally kind of pushing us or pulling us, whichever way it is, in that direction. And I just wondered, like I say, from the outside, I genuinely, you come across to me as very self-satisfied and in a really great place, and really, really great on your, as you are. But I just wonder, sometimes when you don't feel like that, is it do you feel like it's a tension, or is it something that, oh yeah, well, I'm maybe I won't ever do it, or maybe I will, or
I'd say it's been a tension for me for since when you're a teenager and you think that's what's meant to happen next in my life. I don't think I've ever. I think there's many times when I'm fulfilled in the work that I do that I don't feel, I'm not experiencing that tension. But I think on a level of society, I do feel that tension a lot, and not only society but within myself. I don't think it's just about societal expectations. I think there's a natural desire for experiencing love, affection, companionship, for sharing your life with another person, being witness to each other's lives, and support and encouragement. All those things are needed, and of course, I've experienced, having gone past the traditional period where people were worried about you. Um, I've experienced that all kinds of support and encouragement comes from other directions, and all kinds of fulfillment comes from other places. But I think that it's not. I don't think it's an artificial thing to feel that need, and I do think that sometimes we can even fool ourselves that, oh, I don't really have that need, when there's it's just like a lifestyle is not so conducive to actually, finding a partner and settling down. It's very difficult these days to. I mean, I have so many friends that are single, and it's very difficult to meet somebody who is like-minded, who shares similar values, and who has a similar vision for their life. And personally, I've always felt that the most important thing to me is to live the life that's close to those values and vision that are very important to me, and I was always ready to sacrifice sort of convention for that. But yeah, that's not without its angst.
Yeah, everything I suppose has its pros and cons, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and everything's hard. Life is so much suffering is brought about by the mind, and just trying to navigate expectations of others, expectations of ourselves, expectations for our life. So I empathize and sympathize with everybody that's, both in relationships, out of relationships. I can say I've experienced both sides. I haven't been married yet, but I hope to be. And yeah. It's another aspect of life.
It's another chapter to come. Yeah. It's interesting because I think that there's a sort of a renunciation thing that sometimes people who follow a serious spiritual path have. And I know that when I was in my 20s as a monk, we definitely kind of experienced that. And I think as you grow older, it's kind of a process of without, you realize that you almost can't really make progress from an honest place of where you're at until you do acknowledge your needs.
Yes.
Whatever they may be.
Absolutely.
And so even though that might appear at first to be going backwards a little bit, actually it's having a stronger footing to go forwards, I think.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah. And again, it's back to this principle of honesty and integrity. And I think for anyone who's on a spiritual path, but even just in whatever you may be trying to do in the world, really, I'll speak for myself because that's who I'm qualified to speak for. For myself, honesty and integrity is a really important part of what I do. For me, I hold myself to a high standard, so I do feel that acknowledging my needs, my desires, my challenges and frustrations, it's very important not to gloss over them or to. It's very important for me to be seen as I am also. Like when you say, oh, you seem like so fulfilled and such a whole person, I would challenge that and say, I don't think that is how I feel a lot of the time. I feel that way when I do the things that are good for my soul, but as a person, I struggle like everyone else with my mind, with my senses.
Yeah, no, that's it's great to have that insight, because I think that's true of. I mean, maybe you could just say just as we finish up,
Yeah.
having been around a little bit, some of these very famous people and so on and so forth. Because sometimes I think people think, yeah, like you or I may have some degree of success, but still we feel fragile on the inside sometimes. But surely they don't. But so, what has your experience been of now being around, people who we think of as famous and how they are, and maybe them sharing stuff with you?
I mean, I wouldn't want to share anything.
Not personally, any particular person.
Well, I wouldn't say I mix in that world very much, actually.
Yeah.
I think recently I've been associated with people who are famous in the entertainment world. But in my life, through various other sort of reasons and opportunities, I've associated with people who are very successful in other ways too. They may be billionaires or extremely successful entrepreneurs, and it's just a unanimous sort of observation that having things, having conveniences, having success, it doesn't add up to happiness. I mean, it's so cliched. Everybody claims to know that, but society doesn't really set us up to have faith in that. And it's helped me to have those opportunities to engage with all different kinds of people, to see that. I remember even watching, I think it was either an interview with George Harrison on his own, or it was the Beatles. I think it might have been George Harrison on his own, and I think it might have been in the documentary that Martin Scorsese made. But he was being interviewed on a TV show about what it's like to be really famous, and then what does that feel like, and then where do you go from there? And some of the realizations he was sharing, I just found so powerful. It's, they were arguably the most famous people in the world, and he just described how that just it doesn't make you happy. You can still be so miserable on the inside. It's really an imperative to seek out that happiness, which is not based on material circumstances or possessions, or even relationships. But that's a bit of a harder one, actually.
The interesting thing is that you could almost make an argument that the more successful or famous you are, potentially the more lonely or removed you are, because you're in a way your life is less normal. In the sense of you have a bigger house, you're further away from people, you've got higher walls, you're more and more and more removed from normal life, if you like. So
I'm sure that different people deal with it differently. I mean, I'm always interested to read interviews with people, and some manage to keep a lot of normality in their life. And the thing that I've heard from so many well-known people or successful people is that it's just, it's the people in their life, their family, it's the people that have known them before they were famous, that keep them grounded, that remind them who they are. And I wouldn't regard myself as a famous person, but I'm certainly more well-known than I was a decade ago, or than when I was a child. And it's a type of fame, and I've experienced that increase, and it does bring certain type of pressure, or it's a different kind of feeling. And I do feel very much sheltered by friends, by family, and I'm very grateful for that. And even in my minute experience of fame, I can appreciate how challenging it might be for someone that has it on an immense scale.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things, isn't it, that who is it who said it? I wish everybody would become rich and famous so they could realize they probably don't want it.
Right. Yeah. I think we'd all like a bit of it, or we like to try it on for a few weeks,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been so nice to chat to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for questions.
I finish up with 6, I call them kind of like the big pillars of life, if you like. And I'd invite you to just say a couple of sentences on each one, either ideally kind of where you're at with it now, but maybe what's the evolution been for you around that thing in your life. So the first one is family.
Family. Uh, well, I'm extremely blessed to have a very loving family, and in the last 2 years, it's been a very new experience of my first um, sibling to have children themselves. So the experience of family and generations sort of now continuing, and that's kind of been quite mind blowing for me. It's again another clock ticking moment. So yeah, it's exciting to see actually the power and the power that family gives, and also how one has the opportunity to continue creating a loving family environment.
Yeah, and he's a cute little guy, isn't he? You're
Yeah, and she's
yeah.
expecting another in September. So
Ah, that's wonderful. Yeah. Friendship.
friendship. Hmm. Um, I feel so fortunate to have traveled all over the world in the last decade and made so many friends. I would say, people that I really have shared a meaningful experience with and love and care about. But as I've done so, I've realized that there's really no substitute for sort of real time friendship with a very few people. And the more that I'm active on and have following on social media, the more that um, that my sort of network grows. I just see that friendship is a very particular thing when you call it a friend, and I'm learning what it means to have a friend, to serve a friend, to be a friend. I think I'm learning so much in this decade of my life that maybe was a little bit elusive in certain ways in my younger years. So I'm grateful for that.
Nice.
Trying to be a good friend to others as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's nice. Um, love.
Love, love. Trying to understand it, trying to learn to love. That's all I can say. Trying to every day learn what it means to love. Yes.
Yeah, it's a big one, but it's interesting. Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Um, money.
Money. Interesting. I I think I've as much as I've been resistant in my life to the labels of artist or musician, I've also been, I wouldn't say resistant to the idea of success financially, but I've sort of equated that authenticity or purity with something spiritual means that there can also be some financial prosperity, or that the
Mm,
two things don't mix very well together.
mm,
And although I wouldn't say that it's not that I would say things have dramatically changed for me in my life. They really haven't. But in embarking on these concerts and things, that required a lot of investment of money, which was facilitated by supporters who wanted these things to manifest, and that sort of respect for money and appreciation of what it actually can do. I think I'm learning to have a certain comfort um, with yeah with money itself, and with understanding that it's needed, and how it's needed, and what it facilitates. So
yeah,
it's sort of more of an internal dialogue.
yeah. Um, health.
I am starting a juice cleanse today.
Very
I've never
good.
done that before. I've never done that before. Um,
Well, as soon as you're in quarantine, right, you may as well do something, right, like
exactly,
that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm. I did a teacher training and meditation teacher training through the lockdown, and that was incredible for me in terms of um, a real self-awareness with my own mental health,
Mm,
and then physical health as well. It makes you very tuned into the body, and over. time, I'd say over the years, I'm just learning more and more how much, again, going back to the principle of music, what has music taught me to listen. When we're listening to the body, it's giving cues all the time, actually, as to our health or our imbalance of health. And so I'm just trying to be better at listening to those cues and not just being on autopilot. So, yeah.
Nice. And the last one, which I think you'll definitely resonate with, is creativity and expression.
Creativity and expression. Well, there's probably too much I could say on this topic. One thing that's sort of new for me that I'm exploring, and of course, the lockdown has been an incredibly challenging and perhaps even more stimulating time for many creative people, depending on their discipline. And for me, it's sort of propelled me back into a more contemplative space rather than performing and leading concerts and things. And so to that space of writing and reflection. And something that is still something I haven't done very much is, although I've written for many years and written poetry for many years, writing songs and performing songs in English is still something that's quite it's not my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I write songs and I record voice notes on my phone. I've been doing that for at least 8 to 10 years, but I've only ever released one song in English. So that's been, those continue to kind of keep cropping up and flowing out. And part of that has also been, some of your listeners may know the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And I've read it, I've read sections of it and done certain practices from it for many years. But I also recently embarked on actually doing the whole thing. Well, I didn't do the whole thing. I got stuck at week 6, but I intend to finish it. And that has also been immensely helpful for just letting whatever's inside flow and come out, it's always a exciting journey.
Yeah, it's kind of therapeutic in a way, isn't it, to express it?
Definitely. Yeah.
So sounds like we may have some new material coming from you then. Sometimes like it's like the forgotten tapes or the archive tapes or something. You get all those voice notes together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have been just recently. I've also been in the studio recording some. I was working on 3 new tracks, which are more traditional in terms of mantra-based tracks and. Traditional, but maybe not completely conventional musical arrangement, and so that's been lovely as well. And I think the increase in sort of connection and activity with many musicians has enabled me to have the opportunity to work with other producers and other musicians, and so I'm excited to finish those off and share them with everyone as well.
Definitely. Well, I hope people who are listening will have appreciated and taken something from all the various aspects, particularly if they're artistic and can relate to your journey. I'd love for them to check out your music too. So what's the best place for people to find you if they want to check out your stuff?
Well, I guess a super easy way, if you're not a subscriber to any streaming platforms, is just YouTube. You can I've got a YouTube channel and there's lots on there. Otherwise, for Spotify or any other, Google Play, you can just put in my name. I have an album called Like a River to the Sea.
That's a beautiful song. Yeah.
There's also a lot of singles and other projects. So
I urge people to please check Jahnavi out. I think you'll really, really love her music. Of this first series that I'm doing on the Evolving Door podcast, I've got 12 guests. 4 of them, including one of them being you, has a kind of a connection to Krishna consciousness and to that sort of path that we've shared. So I know I don't want to put you on the spot, and I probably won't join in and suddenly start singing with you. But I'd love to actually, but I probably better not. But would you just sing a couple of lines from something that we can leave listeners with, just to kind of finish off the vibe for today?
Sure. Do you want me to sing anything or
anything that you like, and I might even hum along a little bit.
Okay. Okay. This is a verse. This is a verse from the very ancient Bhagavad Purana. I recorded this verse as part of a song, and we recorded the song. It was at the time, I believe. I'm trying to remember. I think our beloved Donald Trump had just come into office. There was all the turmoil of going on around that. There was the Brexit situation, and just generally everything felt there was such an upheaval. And so this prayer is a prayer for that may there be peace and good fortune for everyone. May those who are experiencing anger or enmity, may that become pacified in their hearts. And may we all truly recognize that we are brothers and sisters, children of the divine, and that we can actually experience harmony when we recognize that and work together, serve together. So that's the meaning of this prayer. So I'll just share that. I think this is a good a time as any that we need peace and blessing.
For sure.
Swastyastu vishwasya kala prasidatam dhayantu bhutani shivam mito dhiya manascha badram bhajata dadhokshaje aveshatam no matirapya haituki. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about kirtan, and especially in the way that you present and explain it, is that you don't need to feel like you're a religious person or anything like that to really appreciate that sentiment and that intention and that vibration. It's a wonderfully uplifting idea that I think is much needed in the world, right? Whatever your belief, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can always connect with it, whether you believe in it or not. You can experience. You don't have to believe in the ideology of a singer to just hear their music and experience it. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Jahnavi.
Thank you.
Been a real pleasure
for this wonderful new podcast.
Thank you so much, and to you for I'll be watching out for the next album.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I hope there was so much that you were able to take away from that you could relate to. Hopefully you feel inspired by some of the insights and the breakthroughs that Jahnavi has had along her life. I know it's certainly really interesting for me when we were chatting. I felt very inspired as a result. As always, please make sure to download, subscribe, rate and review the podcast and share with a friend. Really very much appreciative of that. Next week, I have a really interesting guest, a guy called Julian Rubinstein. He's an activist, an actor, comedian, BAFTA award winning. He's absolutely brilliant. Him and his partner in crime, Hayden Prowse, they did a series called The Revolution Will Be Televised. It was so hard-hitting, real political satire, really, really funny. If you haven't checked it out or seen it before, make sure you do. And make sure you join me for the interview next week. I can't wait to see you there. In the meantime, have a really, really great week.